Thanks so much for tuning in today, folks. For the Saturday edition, we're going to quickly give you some snapshots of things to look ahead in the week ahead. Things are going to be emerging. You can be on the cutting edge of conversation with friends and family and colleagues by being able to talk about these things. Last night was a return to the White House Correspondents' Dinner. You'll remember in April when that dinner was planned, there was an assassination attempt. The whole thing got in fact, canceled. President Trump said he was going to come back to it. He hadn't been for quite a while. I can remember uh, having the honor one time of driving with the President of the United States, President George W. Bush. We were actually in his car in a cavalcade going through Washington. That's another day for another story. And he was talking about the White House dinner because it was going to be that night. And he said he was not going to be going anymore because it just was pretty brutal, and everybody pretended they loved each other, and in fact, they didn't. And he said what bothered him was the clips that would be shown then on the news, as most people wouldn't watch the full thing; they just watched the clips. Would be the nasty shots that everybody laughed at about him, and his hard shots at the media. They didn't get the same kind of coverage. Anyway, Trump went, and very interesting. Watching the week ahead for commentary on that because it seemed like there was almost some conciliatory tone from President Trump towards the media and the media towards him. Not that they're caving in or falling in love, but watch for the comments coming up on that this week. This week, on a much more serious note, it appears the U.S. is taking the decision that they're no longer going to go with a so-called light hand with Iran. As we know, at the start of hostilities a few months ago, they pretty well sank the whole Navy. They bombed the Air Force. They took out a lot of their ballistic abilities. The problem now is it's, as one person said, it's pretty hard to stop every Iranian terrorist who also shepherds goats and is hiding behind a rock to use a shoulder-fired propelled missile launcher and fire at ships out there, and it might take boots on the ground. Now, the U.S. had always said they are not going to go to boots on the ground. But basically, in a situation like this, you've got really one of two proposals. You go in, you clean up, you crush them, and you really let the people, the 90 million people who are in Iran, who are currently under huge suppression, you let them actually burst free and form a government that is truly humanitarian. Or you back off and eventually cave in, and I think that would be a disaster because China is watching, Russia's watching, other hostile nations are watching what the U.S. is going to do if the U.S. backs down now. Bad news in the future is my guess. Anyway, they are ramping up, and also warnings going to the Houthis. The Houthis are an Islamic group in Yemen. They are funded by Iran. They are a terrorist group that's funded by Iran, and strong warnings going to them not to get involved, or they could be bombed into hell and eternity like some of the Ayatollahs and their leaders. Anyway, watch that. Increased hostilities this week, so watch for price of oil to continue to go up and stock markets to be a little unsettled. In terms of personalities to be watching for in the U.S., we commented last week about AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, of course, going up in the polls. But on the Republican side, there's somebody that's catching attention now. You'll hear a little more this week about him, but I think in the future years, his name's Brandon Gill. He's a representative from northern Texas, and he's really making a mark in these committee hearings where he really has learned how to hold people to account, how to make people think about the stupidity of what they're saying on some of the Marxist-Leninist positions that so many institutions in the United States are taking. So watch for Brandon Gill's rising star continue to go up. It'll be interesting. Now, the polls, there's just an Emerson College poll that was released that is showing Democrats right now, if the midterm elections were to be held right now, it shows Democrats ahead 11%, which of course would be devastating for the Republicans. It would effectively stop Donald Trump's term in office. It'd be very difficult for him to do the things he'd want to do. And that's going to be interesting. The also shows that now across the board in the U.S., opposition to data centers, the building of these huge data centers, sits at about 63%. That's largely because mainstream media, almost every media source, is saying these data centers will be dangerous. They use up all the water. They use up all the electricity. They're ignoring the fact that data center technology, in fact, has come up with closed loop water system, has come up with ways of using energy and actually putting energy back into the grid in local counties. It doesn't matter. The reflex among mainstream media is that these data centers and AI is evil. Unfortunately, China is not taking that view. And if China surges ahead and gets the lead in AI development, then countries like the United States, like Canada and Europe, will be extremely subject to China technology. So would China then, am I saying that with AI would getting the lead, all of a sudden China would start attacking? I'm not saying necessarily that, but China does supply nations like Iran, nations that will do their dirty work for them, nations like North Korea. And if China gets ahead in the AI race, whether it's talking about military development or breakthroughs in healthcare, wherever it might be, that will be devastating for us in the Western world. And this is a very concerning thing, seeing opposition in so many areas to the building of these data centers. Watch this week, too, an emerging story has just been breaking. There's a spy scandal at NATO. And this is the, of course, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which is 60 some countries, and they're always allied and arrayed. Sorry, I got that figure wrong. But they are all always allied and arrayed against communist forces. And it's a Canadian woman who is, this is just breaking news, seen to be in the middle of the spy scandal that's breaking out, and a Canadian woman, but of Chinese descent. Her name hasn't been released. It might be by the time the day ends, but watch for that. Canada sort of being immersed in the middle of that scandal right now. And keep watching for the issues around the Gordie Howe Bridge. The Gordie Howe Bridge, we've talked about a lot, a fabulous piece of construction that is finally open and going to allow for the hundreds of millions of dollars of commerce back and forth between Canada and the US. But the deal, which was supposed to be, it was all built with Canadian money, and the deal was supposed to be that all revenues, all profits from the bridge, now that it's open, would first go back to Canada until the debt was paid off, and then it would be shared with the US. And there's controversy, the White House saying that that's not the deal, that in fact Canada is going to be paying out from the tolls to the US right away. And Prime Minister Carney has been seen as just not being clear on what the actual deal is. The deal is even written out, it can be available, but there's murkiness to it. So watch for that to continue this week. What was Prime Minister Carney telling the truth about the deal he secured in private with the President of the United States? Food security, watch for that term to continue to emerge. And I've said before, anytime you hear politicians talking about food security, it means it's a warning sign that governments or politicians want to take something over and want to force the rest of us in line. Food security, the ability to buy food, has actually never been greater in terms of, that's one of the reasons immigrants from around the world want to come to Canada, want to come to the United States, because food is so amazingly available at the supermarkets and the grocery stores. Inflation has caused the rise in a number of key food products. Inflation, which is caused by government spending borrowed money, we know that. But I get nervous and more nervous when I see government wanting to take over the supply of food. That will always lead to less competition, less innovation, less healthy food, and more expensive food. Push back when you hear about government wanting to take over the business of being in the supplying of food. Well, as I predicted back when the Olympics was on, you'll remember Eileen Gu. That's her name is spelled G-U. American Asian woman, 22-year-old, fabulous skier, beautiful woman. And they said, watch for her in the future. She's going places continually. And Armani has just signed her to be their global market ambassador for cosmetic, for makeup, for eye care. If her name is shortened, Eileen Gu, I don't know if that was intentional or not, but the big announcement coming out there. And in AI, there's an article in YPulse magazine showing that among its highest in age groups, among the highest opponents of AI is the Gen Z, particularly the 13 to 17-year-old cohort. Vast majority of them being opposed to, not wanting anything to do with AI. As a matter of fact, it's among the Gen Z. There's a common saying now it's developed. If you hear them say, "Oh, that is so AI," that means that is so BS. That's actually what that means. In their minds, AI is a pile of BS, and they want nothing to do with it. Again, not a good sign in terms of future technology, in terms of our young people being able to be on the leading edge of getting jobs and creating jobs. So a real concern there. And you can thank again mainstream media in Canada and the United States. They keep dumping out this message that everything about AI is bad, that is going to hurt our growth. Well, the New York Times, Emmy Neifelt there, the New York Times, and this person is commenting on a lot of polling work and investigative work she's done again with AI. And we hear that there's less people, young people, Gen Z. It's hard to motivate them to work. It's not just laziness, she says, though that's always going to be a part of it, especially when you're talking about that particular age cohort. But they just don't believe in work. They don't believe in work effort. They don't believe that it is there should be a focus on it. And so, folks, anytime when you have a generational shift and the approach to work, and that work not only is not valuable, but in fact, there's no inherent value to it. Not a good thing. Parents need to be talking to their kids about the value and importance of work and work effort. And it doesn't matter particularly what you're working at, but as you work, you develop, you grow, you learn more about it, you move on, you become upwardly mobile. All of these things, a huge percentage of Gen Z not interested in. Watch for continued developments on that discussion. There's just in the whole area of work, and I'm using this as an anecdote. Over the weekend, I was at a beach in British Columbia, and there was it was obvious that there was a baptism service going on, and people were talking there. And I talked with one of the people who was coming up out of the water because I heard him say something about Afghanistan, and I've been in Afghanistan twice and know a little bit about it. And I was talking to him, and he was a formerly Islamic faith. And when the Taliban came in, they were chasing him and his family out of the country or trying to kill them because they wanted to break free from the Taliban. He escaped to Pakistan, somehow wound up in Qatar, and made his way, somehow got to Canada, and actually found faith, found and embraced Christianity by Googling it. He used the word Google, I didn't. On the internet, and finding and researching it and finding out that it struck him that it was probably true, and he made a faith proclamation relative to Jesus Christ. But here's that I mean, that's an exciting part in itself. But here's the interesting thing: one of the people in the refugee agency that's been working with him in the city of Kelowna in British Columbia was saying that he is very industrious. This is a young man, got two jobs, got and is holding two jobs, has $5,000 in his bank account, has just purchased his first car, and now claims that within 3 years he'll have enough money for a down payment on a small home. Folks, it's people often from other countries that recognize the amazing opportunities we get here. So if you're a young person, or if you are a young person and you're saying there's no jobs, there's no hope, you can't do anything, you'll never own a home, the experience in that seems to be to the contrary. So all the best to our Afghanistan friend. And some of you may remember, those of you who used to watch Baywatch. I will not pretend to be among that. I'm not trying to hide or run from that fact. I just never had time to watch Baywatch, though I certainly was aware of, let's say, many of the more positive reflected elements about the people who were in that. But you may remember Brandy Ledford. She was a star, especially in Baywatch Hawaii. And she has for a number of years now been, she talked about actually from the time she was 11 years old, being involved, starting her first marijuana and doing cocaine by 13, and being basically drug addicted most of her life up until this point, even while she was doing all the filming at Baywatch. with cocaine and how she has made a complete break from that. She's just going on the interview circuit, so you may be hearing more about that. She lives part-time in the US and part-time in Vancouver, Canada. And she talks about putting her trust in God. And what she's telling people is trust God. Her saying has become trust God, clean house. Trust God, clean house. There you go for the weekend. Watch for developing stories on these items in the week ahead. Have a great weekend. Thanks for tuning in. Oh, one more thing I wanted to say. How could I forget? Those of you who are watching right now will notice behind me there is a can of WD-40. WD-40. I get all kinds of comments and advice on the website and on this broadcast and the podcast, and we're going through some transition right now. We're adding to it, making it more accessible to you. And one woman had given me the advice of, she said, get some WD-40 and put it on the chair that you're sitting on because we can hear it squeak every time you move. So I don't think I've got it perfectly done, but I took a shot at that. And I just want listeners and viewers to know I do try and listen to those comments and try and act. Thanks for that. Have a good weekend.